Let's create some random numbers. So in Visual Studio, we look at this blank demo, and I will create a random object, R, and set it equal to a new random. So this is the first way to create random numbers, and this is without a parameter to the constructor. So when you do that, it means that your random number sequence is not repeatable. In other words, each time you run the program, you're going to get a different sequence of random numbers. On the other hand, if you give it a seed value, say 10, this is always the same. In other words, you get random numbers, but they're always the same series of random numbers. All right? So then it's just a matter of calling r.next, or your random object.next. So this would be the next random integer in the sequence. So we could call this, say, 10 times. And so that will give me 10 random numbers, and because this is a not repeatable random number object, those will always be different. On the other hand, our 2.next is also going to generate a random sequence of numbers, but they'll always be the same. So let's look at the outcome of that program. So here's one sequence of random numbers, and here's another sequence of random numbers. And we note this one starts with, say, 75 and ends with 15. This one starts with 20 and ends with 20. So I run the program again. And here we see this one starts with 13 and ends with 13. And this one starts with 20 and ends with 20. In other words, this is the same, whereas the sequence on top will always be distinct. And that's because I gave it a seed. That's this one. All right, so these are integer values, and I just asked for the next one. The other possibility is r.next, and instead of giving it no parameter this time, I can either give it a max value, like say 10, or I could give it a range, for example, 1 to 100. But the only tricky thing here is to recognize that the random number generated is always less than the max. So in other words, this is a random number up to, but not including 10. And this is a random number 1 to 99. It's just the way random number generators have worked for quite some time. I think it's more historical than anything else, but that's the way it's set up. All right, so those are clearly integers. If you wanted to generate floating point numbers, you see next double. And with this example, you see that the number generated is between 0 and 1. And again, it never hits the maximum of 1. So this is good, for example, for generating random numbers having to do with percentages and things like that. So that's the random class and generating random numbers.